everybody, welcome to the Hall of Flame Museum of Firefighting. My name is Mark Moorhead. I'm the Curator of Education, and we are the largest historical firefighting museum in the world. We're here in Phoenix, Arizona, and if you can't come into the museum, we like to bring the museum to you. And today we are honored to have with us one of our terrific docents here at the Hall of Flame, formerly the chief of the Los Ranchos Fire Department in New Mexico. And that is Mr. George Dahl. And George happens to have a particular affinity for a particular make of fire truck, a manufacturer of fire trucks, one of the greatest of all time. So George, why don't you tell us a little bit about the wonderful world of Seagrave?
I'm going to talk to you today about a manufacturer of fire trucks and a specific model. This truck behind me is the Seagrave 70th anniversary model. And the reason it's called the 70th anniversary model is because Frederick Seagrave, who started this company, born in Windsor, Ontario, moved to Rochester, Michigan, and began building ladders. Michigan, in the early 1900s, the late 1800s, was full of timber. It was easy to get lumber, and Mr. Seagrave decided he would build ladders that were second to none. In building these ladders, the fire service was also evolving at that time, and he decided, well, not only can I sell these to painting companies and building companies, I could sell them to fire departments. Made a very strong ladder. The ladder was then adapted to be put on apparatus, horse-pulled trailers. This evolved into another business that he created down in Columbus, Ohio, the automotive fire apparatus industry. And in 1881, his business in Michigan was prospering, and about 1890, he moved to Columbus and began building fire apparatus, and especially at the turn of the century, motorized fire apparatus. Now, in the early 1900s, especially in the 1910 through 1930 vintage, all apparatus, fire apparatus in the United States looked like gigantic Model T or Model A cars. They were called cab forward apparatus, just like this truck. The engine on these old apparatus was in front of the cab, and until the early 1950s, late 40s, early 50s, this was the type of apparatus you would buy. Something where the driver and the officer of the truck sat behind the engine. In the late 50s, Seagrave went to that type of apparatus also. But this type of apparatus in the 1940s, they decided that fire trucks were all looking the same, and unless you were a real buff or a maven about fire apparatus, unless you knew the exact truck, you couldn't tell them apart. So just like the auto industry started changing their cars to make them look a little different, the fire industry also did that too. This, the 70th anniversary model, came out in 1950, and it was exactly 70 years since Mr. Seagrave started his company. Now this apparatus, some of the firefighters call this the smiling face apparatus. The grill looked like a grinning person. In some fire companies, the siren here was substituted for a red light, and they call that model the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Cincinnati and Columbus used the ones with the red light in the cowl. Now this truck here came from Oak Lawn, Illinois, and it was brought by one of our docents here at the Fire Museum who worked very hard, and he has since passed away, and this is a memorial to him. This truck was powered by a V12 engine, dual ignition. The reason for the dual ignition engine is, while this truck was pumping or in service at a fire, they didn't want the truck to die and not be able to sustain its engine capabilities. So it had dual ignitions, it had dual distributors, dual spark plugs. Most of the pumping engines of this type were of the 1,000 gallon per minute capacity. They did have some smaller ones, 750 and 500. They also had some larger ones up to about 1,500 gallons per minute. The truck came in a number of models. This model here is just a cab model. There was a semi-cab model where the cab was extended over the back compartment, and then there was one that was called the safety sedan, and that was made in the early 1950s. At one time, the Detroit Fire Department had nothing but the safety sedan models, and the crew rode in the back, right behind the driver, and it was both for safety, and winters in Detroit got very cold, and the firefighters would be protected during the winter. This truck is a ladder truck. It's a city service ladder truck, and it doesn't have the aerial ladder on top, but it has an extensive amount of ladders in the back. Again, very popular. Smaller departments bought city service ladder trucks because they really didn't need an aerial ladder. They just needed 35 and 40-foot ladders to get to the roof of 2- and 3-story buildings. This truck was popular in the Midwest. It was popular in the East. Certain fire departments painted it white. I've seen white and red paint jobs, and the truck was built up until 1970. The last model of the Seagrave 70th anniversary model went to a department in Michigan, Jackson, Michigan, in 1970. But prior to this model going out of service, the fire service went into a cab forward model. And this was where the firefighters and the officers sat in front of the engine of the truck. It was a flat nose. If you see some of the trucks of today, you'll notice that they're very flat-faced, and the firefighters sit in front, the engine is behind them. Well, Seagrave also went into a flat-faced fire engine back in the late 1950s, early 1960s, but they continued to make this model until 1970. I know a little bit about this because I own 2 of them. I bought one from the city of Grosse Pointe Park, Michigan. The other one came from Berkeley, West Virginia. And they were a very, very wonderful truck to drive. The one I had from Grosse Pointe had power steering, and it also had a monitor on the dashboard that you could pull out, and it was a throttle that locked. So technically, when I drove it to Buffalo or to Toronto from Detroit, I had a cruise control setup, but you had to be very careful because it did not automatically shut off. So I find this to be one of the prettiest fire trucks ever made. I have a collection of toys at home of this model, and it's something I really cherish.
George, thank you very much for explaining the Seagrave 70th anniversary series to us. We really appreciate it. We also really appreciate you for stopping by and visiting the Hall of Flame YouTube channel. If you like these segments that we do, make sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also make sure to share them with your friends, share them on social media, email them to your uncle, whatever it is. We love it when you do that. I'm Mark here at the Hall of Flame Museum. Bye-bye.